Good evening. My name is Jenna Brownson, and I am one of the library trustees for the Rubenhor Library. I'm joined here tonight by Mark Rombacher, the chair of the library trustees, Peter Church, a member, treasurer of the library trustees, Libprj, and David Sill. Demetra Taylor is on vacation. Otherwise, all six of us would be here.
So we're going to start our meeting. Jenna's going to do a presentation on the info session.
Yeah. So now that we've been called to order, I welcome you. Thank you all for coming on an August night. We've been tasked with informing the community about our project, and to that end, Sam Alvarez, our director, had a presentation about a month ago in the Cooper Room, which gathered some folks together to answer some of the questions about the library. Since that time, we have had some more information, and we're not only updating all of you as to what's happening, but also in this instance, this is being televised for folks at home who would like to know more about the library project. So, by way of information, this PowerPoint has quite a bit of text, and because you are all lovely, educated adults, I don't want to read the PowerPoint to you, nor do I want to bore people at home with reading the PowerPoint. So, it has been and is currently up on the library website's page, and you can peruse it whenever you would like to, so that you are not feeling as though I'm reading to you. Okay, very good. So there's quite a bit of history to our library project. This is not something brand new that we came up with a few months ago. This has been going on for a long time. It first came up in sort of a public sense at the Chair of Chair meeting back in 2011. We, as library trustees, had had discussions prior to that with respect to the library and its needs, and our community growing and programming and all those things that go into the library. But it really first began with this talk of a new library, and we had envisioned a 2015 application for a construction grant. We had some personnel turnover by way of our directors, which slowed down that process. Since Sam joined us
November 2014.
Right, so it was almost 2 years ago. This has been a really big piece of his work. Because we had had sort of touch and go leadership for a while, it was hard to really get the ball going. Nevertheless, we trustees went ahead in 2014 and did a community needs survey. We invited people from the community to come to the library to talk to us so that we could get a better sense for what people needed, what they wanted, what they saw that was lacking. And from that, we felt confident in going to town meeting in May of 2014 to ask the town to please contribute toward the planning and design grant. So we trustees raised funds to the tune of $20,000 and then asked the town, will you match that? And I actually don't remember if it was unanimous, but if it was not, it was super close to unanimous at town meeting in the spring of 2014. So from that $40,000, we took that money and we hired a consultant to conduct the community needs assessment. This was a more intense look at what the library would need and how it could better serve Littleton as a community. From that time, there was an OPM and a design architect who have been looking at, based on all the feedback that we got from the community needs assessment from the professionals who were gathering the information rather than the trustees who did it about a year before, they came up with 5 different suggestions. And the trustees, from those 5 different suggestions, have been trying to figure out what's a good idea. Part of making that decision was to get a library building committee. So that library building committee was comprised of folks from the community, both staff, library trustees, other members of other boards, to look at, well, what exactly should this building be doing? How should it be serving the community? Part of that were field trips to recently renovated or newly built libraries. And they came back to the trustees and to the architect and said, here are some things we like. Then that went into the mix of designing a building. And then the library site selection committee, which was formed by folks from all sorts of boards, staff members of the library. Sam Alvarez was part of that. We had trustee members, Board of Selectmen, Melissa Hebert was there. Steve Moore from PMBC was there, and he's here tonight. And other folks were part of talking about, well, we're going to walk around, well, they probably drove. We're going to drive around Littleton, and we're going to try to figure out where we should put the library. One of the things that we're tasked with in making the application is letting the state know that we have considered the space that we're currently using, and is that something that can be rehabbed in any way? Is that something that we can meet the needs of the community by way of using the existing space? So of the 5 designs that came up, one of those designs was in fact looking at rehabbing the, for lack of a better word, I suppose that would be, where's west? That way? So maybe the south end of the building, north end of the building, south end of the building. South, yes. Okay, so this is one of these very wordy slides, but in essence, the slide is letting you know that lots of people have touched upon this. By a suggestion from the Board of Selectmen to develop another touch-in with the community, we sent out by way of email and the website and the town website, and folks shared the link to the survey online. The trustees developed a survey which we then shared with the community, and as of now we have over 700 people who have weighed in on what they think. The questions very much are directed to, here's the infrastructure of the building now, here's some potential for in the future, and the main question is, would you like to build a new library, renovate the existing library, do either of those, or do nothing? So we gave them all the options, all those 4 options we saw as being the four options a community could take moving forward. Part of the impetus for even talking about a new library has to do with the fact that we are a growing community. Our library, by way of comparison, is a very popular library. We have, Sam found this statistic about Fitchburg being about 4 times the size of our library, and they circulate 20% less annually than we do. That is, I think, a real compliment to the services that our staff offer to our patrons, and also a sign of how much we value the library and how much it enhances our community. 52,000 people visited last year, which, to do the math, is about 1,000 people a week. To be honest, not a lot of people are coming in during snowstorms in January, but the summer reading program that just finished after 9 weeks, I was in the children's room today, and the kids read over 4,000 pounds of books. Diane Haddock had a scale that the kids, after they would self-check out their books, weigh the books. And what I think she anticipated was going to be on just one wall, ended up extending over the cubby area and around the room because of the enthusiasm that the kids in our town have for reading and earning prizes. I'm sure that's also part of their incentive. The children in the teen spaces are, they tend to be fairly crowded when the kids are here. It's lovely that we have both Russell Street and the middle school kind of down the hill from here. Lots of kids come from school and spend time here. And I think the staff has felt like there really isn't adequate space for them to dedicate their time to studying or even to socializing. It's just really elbow to elbow. Okay, so I went to school here. I went to 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade in this building. when I was a child, the beautiful yellow brick Houghton Memorial Building was the library, and I would go down to the dank basement and smell the mildew. That was my experience as a child with the library. Here in 1989, they moved. They moved over here, and they said, we're gonna dedicate this end of the building to the library. And while at the time I think that seemed like a space to expand into, it wasn't built to be a library. For any of you who have been to UMass Amherst, they built a 25-story building out of brick, and there's a perimeter with taped off because the bricks of a brick building are popping out of the building because they didn't think to calculate the weight of the books. Now, certainly we don't see bricks popping out of the end of this building, but there's a legitimate concern with the weight of books in a building which is not structurally engineered to carry that amount of weight. And while we haven't had any ceilings caving in just yet, were that ever to happen, and with the knowledge that we have right now, my training as a lawyer is screaming the word negligent and liability, which I would hate to see happen by way of a library. We are obligated by state law in our budgeting to expand our collection. And when we expand the collection, it just gets heavier. Another big concern is the failure for our library to properly comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. This legislation is from the early 90s. We are now well into the teens. We are 25 years overdue. And while there is the ability for someone to come into the library who uses a wheelchair, it better be a really compact wheelchair, because the mechanism for getting that person in through the front of the library into this sort of convoluted lift it's not programmed for anything that's more modern or heavy duty. So about 6 weeks ago, Sam and I took a tour through the library with a woman whose work is with nonprofits. She herself is from a nonprofit, the Institute for Human-Centered Design. And she went ahead and talked to us about how there are lots of things that could be improved upon. And since that time, we've tried to do sort of the stopgap Band-Aid fixes with respect to better lighting, with respect to some other things did we purchase?
Better lighting, we're working on getting the bathroom.
Oh yes, that was a big piece. So the bathrooms need to, some of the bathroom, when you go to try to open it, the door is super heavy. And someone in a wheelchair is going to have, or it's not just folks in wheelchairs, because it has to do with anyone who has mobility issues, who has strength issues, who isn't able to, buck up and shove the door open. So that's something that we're going to address, because we really feel like that's sort of a non-negotiable that we have to take care of now. But even the navigation through the library is such that it is not comfortable or convenient for many people. There are lots of picayune things that were discussed. Nevertheless, they all have to do with compliance, and the library is not compliant. There are dozens and dozens of things that as we walk through, she said, and this, and this, and that. Also, above and beyond the Americans with Disabilities Act, there's the idea that we have lots of folks in a community who, while perhaps not mobility impaired, they have other matters which are sensory integration, executive functioning, that the signage in the libraries, in our library, could be improved, that the amount of stimulus in the children's room for kids who struggle with any sort of sensory overload. I mean, frankly, there are adults who I'm sure would like to take a break from the sensory overload that we have as a culture. There are things that we can do to be better about addressing everyone and make it better for everyone. And when a parent is able to take their child with sensory issues to a children's room where there's a little quiet tent area, that child's happy and the parent is happy, and it makes for a better community experience for that family. Okay, so our library is 16,000 square feet. Based on the expertise of the architects and the planners, the suggestion is that the library footprint needs to be increased. And it's not just to accommodate books, it is to accommodate space for meetings, for gatherings, for the community to come together. So the plans are all for about 25,000 square feet. And as the slide says, the committee needed to look at, frankly, what is it going to cost, and what are the pros of this one and the cons of that one. But meeting space was important. Having the shelves and with the books to be accessible for everyone. Certainly the ADA compliance, and the kids and the teens need more space. And technology is something that the staff has reported to the trustees. There are people who come to the library because this is where they would consider their computer is, and where they would consider their internet access is, and where they would consider an opportunity to apply for a job. With so much being reliant upon technology, if you don't have it at home, the folks in Littleton have it at the library. Okay, so these are estimated costs, and the estimation is based on money down the road. When we, as the trustees, first got the numbers, they were not 16 and 15 million dollars. They were quite a bit less.
And they're still not this, we still haven't got our cost estimated. These are just broad numbers that are being estimated.
Right, so to some degree, the estimated costs are more so relative to one another than they are in fact hard numbers. So if you look at this slide here, renovation and expansion looks to be about $16.5 million, while the slope site is $15.5 million. For those of you who are not aware of the slope site option, that came up back about 2 months ago when the library trustees, along with PMBC and the Park and Rec and the athletic director, there was talk about the tennis court being a place that we would put the library. And the tennis court would then need to be replaced and moved elsewhere. And after quite a bit of talking about it and thinking about it and planning around it, it seemed like the tennis court was going to have more sort of bureaucratic hitches than another option. So the idea of the slope is, if you think about where you are right now, there's the parking lot, and then there's what people would call the sledding hill. If you're standing at the top of the sledding hill, it's to the right. And I have pictures. Okay, so this slide is about the existing library space. It is the blueprint of the library. I'm going to skip over it, presuming you've all had an experience being in the library. So here's the slope site. So this is a bird's eye view standing on Shattuck Street and then going up and facing west. And as you can see, as I mentioned, it's to the right of the sledding hill and where the baseball field is. And the front of the library would look like that. And sort of from afar and then closer up. And then this would be the first picture. If you were standing watching your kids sled, presume there's snow on the hill, and you looked to your right, that's what it would look like. And then if you were to have to carry your child's sled back up the hill, this is where you would be standing, groaning about the fact that you took your kids sledding. But that's what the library, and this is just sort of a guess. It's not an exact, perfect, what we definitely are going to have, and it's going to look just like that, and like it or lump it. This is a guess at how the architect said, okay, this is what we could have it look like. this is the main level, and as you can see in the green section to the left of the slide, that's a study space and
Reference area.
in a reference area. You know, the library is laid out to have folks be able to come in and almost intuitively know what to do and where to go. And the lower level will include the children's room and the teen area?
The meeting room.
The meeting room, okay. And the meeting room is such that, much like our Cooper room now, that people who wanted to use the meeting room at times that the library was closed, they would have the opportunity to do that because of keys or pads or codes or something. All right, renovating our current site at the south end of the building. You can see the T that's laying on its side. That's the shape of the building, and then it would be expanded out with those two additional pieces. As I mentioned before, the structural load on the floors is the concern, so the books would be moved out to the wings, which would be built in a way to support the weight of books. So this is what that looks like, putting an addition on. And then the tennis court site, which I had mentioned, sits right on top of the tennis courts. And after talking to other people who have an investment, not only in playing tennis, but the other boards who felt strongly about the tennis courts remaining where they were, it seemed to us that this perhaps is not the best option. And our task as library trustees is to make the application to the state with here is what we believe is our best option as a community, with the history of having included a lot of thoughts and opinions and comments, so that if we get the grant in as early as July of 2017, and when we would come then to town meeting to say, will you townspeople pay for half of our library, that people will feel like that's the one that I like, that's the one that I made a comment about, that's the one that I contributed an idea to. So we want to provide to the state the most well-received of the bunch. And the tennis court site, we already have a sense, is probably not in the running for that. So that's what it would look like. All right, a complete tear down and a new building. There are some conflicts with this one as well. Remind me why though, Sam?
Basically because we're connected to the town hall, so there would be issues with connecting to the town hall.
There's also little advantage to doing this versus building a new building, entirely new building, because the space that we're vacating won't be vacant.
Right.
We're taking the same
Right,
footprint.
that's another thing that I think sometimes gets lost in this discussion, is that if we end up doing something to the existing space, we believe we have a responsibility as a community, and I imagine also our certification is on the line. We need to move the library from where it is now to some other space, and I hate to move. I bet you many of you in the room hate to move, and if you think moving books is fun, it's not fun, it's terrible. The other thing too is if we built new, so we would take all the books out, we'd put them someplace else, it'd be like a satellite library for a while. That means that the space that's there now can't be used by anyone else because we have stayed there. And certainly in my years being involved with town government, there has been comments about the Park and Rec needing more space, the Council on Aging needing more space, other town boards wanting perhaps a different place to call home. If we stay, that space is not an option because we have not left. All right, let's skip over that. The Morgan property. I know that the fire chief had thought perhaps that the Morgan property could be a possibility. For those of you who don't know what that is, if you're standing at the Congregational Church and you're looking at, there's the farm there, there's the garage there. If you look a little bit to the right, there's something called Two Brothers Trail. Anyone who's participated in the Appleman knows the Two Brothers Trail. It's also known as the Ankle Breaker Trail. If you go down there, there's a bit of land back there, which is town-owned. And I know that when the fire chief thought about a new fire station perhaps being sited there, that there were concerns about the structural costs of putting in a road. We too have that same concern, but ours is compounded by the fact that public libraries are supposed to be highly visible in a community. And it would not be highly visible back there. And in fact, the Mass Board of Library Commissioners, I don't know if they would wholly disqualify us if we submitted the Morgan property, but they sure wouldn't see that as a publicly visible anchor in the community. So the Morgan property, you see how it's tucked way back there? That's also something that, by way of receiving the grant, we have, in essence, dispensed with. Okay, so of the options, it really has come down to our minds as the trustees, and with the information we've gotten from lots of folks in the community, is between renovating or this slope site that I've mentioned. And I'll give you a moment to look at the slide rather than reading it to you. Okay, so with respect to these two competing options, as you can see, at least the way that they've been bulleted, there are more cons and fewer pros to the renovation, and there are more pros and fewer cons to the slope site. Another piece with respect to the grant, our project, because we can apply for a grant, there is a large sum of money sitting in banks all over Massachusetts that fund libraries. There are people who believe that libraries are important community assets. And because of that, there's this huge fund, hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, they're not going to give us all the millions that we need, but they have told us they've told everyone, based on your needs, we will give you between 40 and 50%. And I believe it's cut into 3 tiers, 40, 45, or 50%. While certainly we don't have a crystal ball to predict it, it seems as though, based on what we've compared ourselves to, that we could very easily be given the 50% grant, which is great. And if we build a new building, we actually get an additional 2.5
to 3%.
2.5 to 3%. There's an encouragement, if you're going to build something new, you should do so in keeping with the idea that we should take care of our planet, and they give us money incentive to do that. It's actually a payback once you're done.
Yeah, once we're done, I spoke to the architect the other day. He said we're probably going to be guaranteed at least $100,000.
Okay, $100,000. That's great. Okay, so I've already talked about why the other options, in our estimation, were not the best options. And again, to remind you that in order to get 52.5% of our library funded, we have to make sure that what we're putting forward to the state is something that they are going to feel like the community is behind. So we want to pitch something that you all will be happy with. Okay, so this is going forward. Our plan will be to submit the construction grant for January 2017. It is a tremendous amount of work. I don't imagine there's not a day that goes by that Sam has not done something in the last 20 months to think about the best possible presentation to make so that we have a chance of getting the biggest chunk of money. So we're not the only one now. There are about 30 libraries who submit during each round. And the libraries all talk to each other about, well, are you going to submit? Are you going to submit? So Sam has a pulse on the fact that he pretty much knows that there are going to be about 30 of us. And my guess is you've talked to a lot of those directors about the process, even if it's commiserating with them over the process. And as I mentioned, the libraries are evaluated by need, and we are of the opinion that because of our numbers, with 52,000 patrons annually, with 6,000 kids who came in this summer, 4,000 pounds of books, that this is the sort of library that the state will look at and say, wow, that is one heck of a good library. We definitely should give them lots of money. The earliest we would hear, this is going to be the longest 6 months in our lives, apart from pregnancy, will be July 2017. And we will hear we'll hear 4 or 5 of the people who get the money will be told in July of 17. And the other 25 will, have to wait. And then about 6 months later, in January of 2018, another 5 will be told. And the other 20 will have to wait. So there will be there'll be 6 times where this is announced who gets it and when you're getting it. So theoretically, this could be years away before we hear, yes, Littleton, we're going to give you, whatever, $5 million, $10 million, won't we tell them? No, $5 million. So for the sake of argument, let's say in July 2017, Sam gets the call that says, yes, we've picked you. Yes, we're going to fund it 50%. Yes, we believe that what you've submitted by way of a new construction will meet all the LEED requirements, which means you'll get that $100,000 back. We would then, as the library trustees, come to town meeting in November and say, here's what the library costs, half of which the state is paying for. And again, I'm saying half optimistically. It could be 40%. But let's, $10 million library, $5 million the state's going to pay for. And we have been, we've started fundraising. And Liza Ahern, who's our one of the co-chairs of fundraising, mentioned to me tonight that not only is the Mass Board of Library Commissioners a great funding source, there are lots of others. And we have time to look into other public and private or corporate sorts of contributions that we can get in addition to asking people in town, what does the library mean to you and what would you be willing to contribute to help defray the costs that will remain after the state grant, other grants, and the fundraising to reduce what will ultimately be an ask to the community for millions of dollars. Okay, so I've mentioned that. Okay, so what we still need to do, we need to come up with an idea of where we're going to stick the library. And if it turns out that the slope site is where we are going to put the library, we need this geotechnical survey to happen. I mean, I don't know if they're, not being a geologist, I'm not sure, but they're probably looking for spotted salamanders and like oil. So those 2 things, once they rule out that those things aren't there, we can go ahead and move forward on that. The letter of intent is, again, that's work for Sam to do, to let the state know, yep, we're still on schedule, things are still moving along well. And we also will need to have a cost estimator. So once the community chooses what it is that, what design we're going to go with, someone will need to look at that more carefully and price it out so that when we go to the state, we can give them a firm number. As I mentioned, there's another vote, which will be a town meeting of May of 17. So Sam's going to make the application for January to be considered for the 2017 grant award. And then he will come to town meeting through the trustees, and we'll be requesting that you all say that his application was warranted. It is sort of a backwards way of doing it. However, it's done this way because we do need to make sure that the community's behind it. It's expected to be done at the town meeting, and you're given 6 months from the January deadline. And because Massachusetts state law requires town meetings to happen sometime in the spring, and no later than I think even as late as the end of June. Because there's that requirement, the state knows every town will have a chance to have its town meeting and, in essence, give the stamp of approval to move forward. If we came to town meeting and people said, no, we don't want a new library, then we would let the state know, please don't consider us for the grant. So theoretically, this could stop in its tracks, I guess you could say, by a May vote saying no thank you. We don't want that to happen. So don't consider what I just said a suggestion. All right, so Mark Rombacher, our chair, has come to his 5 comrades on the board, and and talked to us quite a bit about making sure that we are letting everyone know, keeping everyone everyone up to date on what's happening. But I want to make it clear that it's not as though this is coming out of thin air. There have been over 50 posted public meetings about the library, be it the trustees, PMBC, we've been to school committee, we've been to FinCon, we've been before the Board of Selectmen. This is not something that, Sam arrived at the library and dreamed up, when he was in Amsterdam, a few months ago and said, how about a new library? This has been something which has been talked about for years. I've already mentioned the cost estimator, the town meeting approvals, the fundraising to offset. And look at, I'm done. Terrific. Oh, let me just make a point. We have other things in town that people want. Primarily, those two things right now are a new fire station and a design for Alumni Field to rehab the athletic centerpiece of play for many sports in town. My understanding of how people are looking at those projects is that so-called free money is waiting to be applied to the Alumni Field. I've heard that those two are tied in people's minds, and people have said simple things like, oh, well, it's free money. Just by way of clarification, taxes collected on things that we weren't paying off, that's our money. It's not free money. It's already collected taxes which are sitting in the bank. With respect to Alumni Field, to link those two as if that free money was given freely, it was collected as taxed money. With respect to funding the fire station within the levy, I understand by nuts and bolts why that pie chart makes it look like, oh, that makes sense, and we're not going to have to raise taxes. But it's not as though we're not buying a potentially $8.8 million fire station. To tie within the levy to the fire station, again, is in the minds of people making it sound like, well, it's not costing us anything because we're already paying taxes to that amount, which leaves the library in a position of, oh, if you vote for the library, your taxes go up. And that is categorically unfair to the library. All of it costs money, whether it's been collected, whether it's tagged to what you're already paying, or whether we're coming to you and asking, will you please fund it? All of it is being funded by our money. And we are a community that I think people have felt like you've got to pick or choose what you want. And when you buy stuff, you do have to pick or choose what you want. But to tie free money to Alumni Field within the levy to the fire station and jacking up your taxes to the library is unfair. And I would say, and would make the argument, that if the free money were tied to the library and then within the levy was tied to Alumni Field, Scott Wodzinski would be standing up here saying, hold on a second, let's not have this fiction in your mind that it's not real money. It's real money, which we all pay for. So with that in mind, I would also like to ask that you consider the fact that we are able to fund half of our project by people who we don't even know, who are willing to bank hundreds of millions of dollars toward something like a library. And the Alumni Field folks might know of sports enthusiasts who have the same sort of fund. And Scott Wodzinski might know of someone who is helping to fund fire stations. But I'm going to ask us all as a community not to tie these things in your mind together because it puts the library at an unfair advantage. It all costs money. And we as a community need to decide how we want to spend our money. So, having said that, I will thank you for coming, and we'll try to answer any questions that you may have, relying upon my fellow board members and Sam if there are additional things I don't know. There's got to be something. Yes, hello.
The visibility issue on the smoke, what, is it visible there?
You know, I was concerned about that too. In fact, when I first heard of the slope site,
Yeah.
I pictured it going into a pit and being totally invisible. I can go back to the slide where if you were standing right here and you look across the parking lot, that's what you would see. So with respect to visibility, Sam has checked in with the Mass Board of Library Commissioners, and because the library is here here, that here is close enough to this here that they would end up saying, yep, it's part of this sort of campus of buildings. Also, with respect to the slope site, we would be obligated also to enhance the access from the Russell Street Middle School road there. If anything awful were to happen, we would need to get folks in that way. That road also, I imagine, will be heavily trodden by middle school and Russell Street students who would come to the building, and in fact, they would come in downstairs into the children and teen area. So I too was concerned about it being thrown into a pit. But it does not have, Sam has shared this with his contact at Mass Board of Library Commissioners, and she has said that that is fine. Thank you. Yes.
Mike Zeldin, Lowland Street. I'm sort of mystified because this building, a library, the new library, whenever it's going to come, is something that is not built for now. It's built for at least the next 25 years. I can't speak for all the elders in the room, but we're probably the last generation that it's going to basically, and I'm going to say it, books, what you mean by books and 4,000 books is paper. Paper.
Yes.
We're probably the last generation that's going to basically use, most of us are going to use exclusively paper. The next generation, in fact, I know they're coming because I've seen it, and I also know that the various national library associations are all talking about, shall we say, that the digital age which has arrived.
Yeah.
So what worries me is not whether or not, we're now in the weeds of how you deliver information.
Right.
I don't see why we're talking about 4,000 books and the weight, or whatever it is, when in fact we already have access to e-library. In other words, it's the thinking inside the box. You're like inside our current library, thinking about our current library. And what worries me is that there's nothing fresh, new, that actually will take care of the future, both with respect to location and the fact that the library is actually part of a larger, what we'll call social informational circle in this town, which ties together the young, the old, the middle, whatever. And I think that those should be more closely aligned. For example, I believe there's already a proposal floating around, I don't know the details of it, of putting it over the parking lot. Why do we have to go to the slope?
I have never heard a proposal to
Well,
put it in
I'm-
the parking lot.
it's-
In the parking lot?
No, on top of the parking lot.
Right, no, that's what I
On
meant,
top. I mean,
yes.
it's there. I mean, no, it's not where it comes from. There's been no thought about the future that I can see from the planning. It's all an assumption that we're going to move N number of books from this location to this location. Not necessarily so. We physically don't need space for books. We need space for people and for using the information. So I don't see that anywhere in the planning.
Oh, okay, well, let me.
Wait.
Oh, okay.
It is not the particulars of your planning.
I see.
It is the approach. Everything is in the box, which does not, shall we say, imbue great confidence.
So I'll take a stab at part of this. We've heard for many years that the digital age is going to kill libraries. It's been out there for 10 years, right? That the advance of the internet and everything is going to, our circulation number of paper books hasn't dropped. People are still checking them out at roughly the same rate as they always
Okay,
have.
all right, look.
No, so there's
you're
always
in the
going to be
weeds.
the need for books. The question is, when there's fewer, will we see the day where there's fewer books in the library? Quite potentially, right? But that's not now. And maybe it's in 25 years, but I don't even see it in the next 10 or 15.
Okay, I'm sorry, there already exist libraries that are fully digital. They're already there, okay? In fact, our library, if you go and dig a little bit, on its website, which it shares with other libraries, which is another idea I'm surprised never popped up in thinking inside the box, we already have access to e-library, where you can actually bring many books right to your screen. You don't have to go to, quote, a physical place as much as you should or would. By the way, I happen to like libraries a lot, I like paper a lot, but I'm also aware that we're dinosaurs, okay? Already, the next generation is going to be basically using digital sources. So why don't we plan accordingly? assess our needs really. For example, a little calculation I did indicates 75% of the books in our catalog are available digitally at this time. We don't have to have them in the stacks.
Okay, so.
So all I'm saying is,
so-
I'm not going to argue the particulars, it's the approach of not thinking beyond
Okay,
the
so
box. That's all.
I hear your critique is that, in essence, we're just replicating the way it's always been done, with an appeal to tradition rather than forward thinking.
Planning for the future.
Planning
Yeah.
for the future. Okay,
Right.
part of the planning process, there's an expectation that we are incorporating into the plan exactly those things that you're talking about, an ability to have things be available through e-technology. I'm sure you recall my mentioning, there are folks who don't have that kind of technology. And I am of the opinion that if you don't have a Kindle, it doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to have access to information. I mean, part of the great liberty of our nation is access to information. And the public libraries are something which have traditionally been the source for that information. Education is important, and the fact that you can download potentially, as you said, 75% of our collection somehow through, I don't know, Amazon, and you can order it as a Kindle, doesn't mean, books aren't free though.
If you go, you're in the weeds, you're missing the point, you're really missing the point.
Okay,
What is
well,
the-
let me know, hold on a second.
What is your point? Exactly.
My point exactly is that we are in fact replicating in the thinking. You're talking about details. How digital the library is trivial at this point. It's the thinking. It's basically, you were thinking about the library in a certain way, and you mentioned weight of books. You mentioned, we're going to put the library here. And those are not indications that look, I appreciate the work you've done. This is not a question of, gee, you haven't done enough. Maybe it's time to say, take a moment and say, look, 20 years from now, this library service, which is both social, cultural, and informational,
Yep.
has got to serve the needs of the town, not in the next 5 years, but the next 25 years.
That's the whole point of this project, sir.
I understand this, but the project comes across to me as being a replication.
Okay, so,
But-
That's
can I,
all.
all right, can I, yeah, hold this a second. So,
That's it.
I hear what you're saying, but when asked for specifics as to what that means, you say that we're not thinking outside the box and that we're in the weeds.
You talked, I'll give you an example. You talked about the weight of the books.
Okay, hold on.
You all right?
In the building?
In the building. You
Okay.
talk about the weight of the books.
Right.
All right? So that tells me you're not thinking about the fact that it's paper. Okay?
No, I am thinking about the fact it's paper. Paper weighs
We
what it
don't need a
weighs.
lot, but in the future, very near, the next 5 years, 10 years, you're not going to need that much paper. How come you haven't asked the other libraries around here, can you combine? And with one server sitting in one place, maybe all of you can start sharing half of your collection.
Because I think
We already
that
do.
there are members of our community who will support the idea of sitting in your house, isolated, and touching in with someone by way of technology, or consolidating with Boxborough, is not something that we're interested in doing. I mean, when we talked about doing that with the five,
Than books.
I agree
Wait,
with
no,
you.
listen, do you know what goes on there? What people are, okay, what we're
I do
looking
know
at-
what goes
I
on in
was-
real libraries.
I was in,
all right?
listen,
In a real library.
I was on the committee that visited the other libraries, and we said, you know, what would you have done differently? All of them said, more meeting rooms, more meeting rooms.
Agreed,
People,
agreed.
we have
Yes.
people coming in, more and more people are working from home. They're trying to make conference calls from home. The kids are running around, the dog, they come in the library, they use the conference room. People need to get together to meet, they come in the library. Older people, we have a lot of senior citizens who are cold in the winter and hot in the summer. They come in and they sit in every day, all day, there are people sitting in there reading. They
Sure,
talk
I
to each other,
understand this.
they visit.
So suppose we cut the amount of space devoted to books by, let's say, 20% of the total space, and that was devoted to the service of the community that way, just the way you described.
There's a
well,
lot
that's
of
exactly what we
maintenance built
did.
in.
That's exactly what we did. 16,000 square feet right now.
Uh-huh.
A small percentage of that is dedicated to these conference rooms. When we expand to this new, a lot more space, footprint-wise, is dedicated to those meeting rooms and study spaces and areas where you can have privacy to be on the phone, to make a conference call,
To use
to
your
work from the
laptop,
library, to use your laptop, and plugins for technology, like centers within the library. It's exactly what they did when they went around and said, well, what should we do? And they said, well, you should make sure that you've got more space for meeting rooms because that's what the community comes here to have those things happen. By way of the weight of the books, I talked about weight in two instances. One was the floors aren't strong enough. People can believe that or not believe that, but we've checked they're not strong enough. A structural engineer has said, not good. The other was just an anecdotal comment about the children reading. Diane Haddock wanted them to read a ton of books, a literal ton. They read 2 tons. They weighed their books on a scale on the way out the door. It was a kitschy way to get kids to read. 6,000 children participated in this program over the summer. They weighed their books. So by way of my commenting on those 2 things, you're right, books are made out of paper. And there are lots of people in this room who grew up reading books on paper and were handed a Kindle and said, look at this technology. And a lot of us said, I don't like that. I don't read on that because I don't like it. People like the feel of a book. Now, there might be people who never grow up touching books. I feel sad for them if that's their experience. But if they get their information through screens, that's certainly their prerogative. Libraries are not irrelevant. They're actually more relevant based on the fact that they are an asset in a center of the community where we have gotten outside the box and thought about things like more meeting spaces. Mr. Sanders.
George Sanders, 672 Great Road. I think what the gentleman is saying here, and I sort of kind of agree with him to a certain extent, is that he's saying that the future, as we look forward, we're looking at e-books at some point. As you well know, the industry now is saying, let's go paperless with everything, your bills and everything else. You can go online and pay it, etc. You make the expression of the poundage per square foot in this building here is not sound enough to hold these books. But if you took this new building and did not elaborate on the point of the book weight and you put it on the foundation floor, then you don't have to worry about the weight of the books because the foundation will be able to carry the weight of the book. You could put an elevator in, a book elevator, where you can take the books and load them on there, and you can send, where there's 2 floors, you can send it from the basement floor to the 2nd floor with an elevator, which a lot of places have that, where you can transfer, you can push stuff up and down all the time. And a lot of the hotels have that, where they have the elevator that goes up, they bring food up, et cetera, et cetera. So my thing would be here with regards to this building here. I guess it doesn't matter if it's on the slope or not. My point is that what I'm concerned about the cost that is involved here. And you spoke back about the money, that it's all money that's real money here. Well, my understanding is that when the high school and the fire station comes off, it's supposed to be sort of kind of a balance that's going to fit in place with what the fire station is going to need to cost, and that money is sort of kind of going to balance itself out there. The alumni field is that's something that they've come up and said, okay, we need to do this. Suppose there's money available that we can do this. They're talking about anywhere between 2.5 and I just said 2.7 $1 million with regards to the amount of money that they're going to need. So the next thing that you have available, which jumped ahead in here, was the library here. So these figures, I know you said that they're not concrete in terms of that. Yeah, usually 40, 45, or 50. Sometimes I remember before when the state gave 52% of money to a library there. I was in Fitchburg before that. I know that Libprj built a new library and so forth, the money came in. My concern right here now is that I think it's sort of kind of backwards in a way that the state takes and requires the town or the city to submit the application, because the people are not on board yet with what you are doing. You may have a survey of 700 there, but 700 is a small number that represents the total number of people that's here in Littleton. And what I mean that you're not on board, the people don't really know what the cost. What do I have to go on? We have elected officials here. And those elected officials are supposed to be working in our best interest and telling us as citizens and as taxpayers what it is that this town can actually afford. And the only way that you get that information is, I think the trustees have to sit down with a joint committee with FinCom, the town CPA, the town administrator, the selectmen, and the trustees, and your engineer, and see what is it that you need. If you're talking about building a structure where that books are concerned with the weight in regards to that building, well then maybe that can be eliminated because you could put the books on the foundation and you wouldn't have to worry about that weight as the structure of the building for the first floor. So I think that what we're dealing with is an amount of money here that we need to ensure that it doesn't raise the taxpayers' rates. You're going to be paying a max, as we always pay the max in this town, of Proposition 2.5. They tax us every year 2.5%. That's where the town get their money for new growth and the 2.5% that we all are sharing. They haven't lowered that on us, so we're going to be paying it. Now, the only way that if this is going to jump over and raise the taxes, then you're going to go in, and it's the same thing as override. If you're going to go and ask for debt exclusion for X to go and to build this library, it's the same thing like override, just that ain't permanent. It's there for a short period of time. Well, in this particular case, it'd probably be, I don't know. I put a request into the town accountant asking, what could this town afford in terms of the budget? This town must live within this budget just like you and I must live within our budget. So if there's increase in our taxes, it doesn't matter whether you're a senior or not. If there's increase in our taxes, then that means that this library is more important than some of the other things that we are building, like the fire station. And if the fire station is being built and we're not having to raise our taxes, I can't find the need for the library to come along and raise the taxes for us to pay for it. Even though we find that the state, and we don't know exactly what the state going to give us, but I think to go forward to the state, this is my thinking, that the trustees should know from the parties that I just mentioned earlier, what can this town afford? If the officials of the town can tell the trustee, this is what this town can afford, I believe, as any other building has been built in this town, that when they conveyed to the people and told the people, this is what we recommend, we can afford it, we can do it, we can live within the budget, people have normally passed the project without any objection. And this is what I would like to see happen with the library, is that these people tell the people what it is that this town can afford. And once you tell us that, then I think when it comes to May or June or whenever you're going to get the information from the state as to what is what, then I think it will be somewhat of a smooth sailing versus coming up and the people killing the project.
Okay, so you've just made a lot of points. There are a few that I would like to touch upon because I think it goes again to how this project is being perceived. First of all, you made a comment about 700 people filling out the survey. The survey has been out now for 3 weeks. 700 people is about triple the number of folks who showed up at town meeting. So as far as 700 being an insignificant number, when we have 200, 250 come in a town meeting, I find it hard to swallow the idea that 700 is not a significant number. Secondarily to that, you mentioned elected officials.
Wait a minute, don't.
Hold on, the 6 of us are elected. We are charged with making sure that this public institution continues to thrive. We certainly want to coordinate as best we can with the other boards. But our job and our loyalties are to the library. So when the day comes that we come to town meeting and say, will you please pay for it? The Board of Selectmen might say, we also support that, or they might say we don't support that. And as much as we would like everyone to support what we're doing, we have an intention of moving forward because 3 times the number of folks who show up at town meeting answer a survey. And that's significant.
That may be significant in the point that you're saying as a survey, but I am telling you, when it comes to the point of us having to pay for it, it ain't 700 people paying for it.
I understand that, and I respect that.
Don't misconstrue what I'm saying. I'm not saying that the number you did, because you did a previous survey,
Right.
and you only had this is based on the Board of Selectmen telling you that you should go back and do it again, and that you should bring this meeting down here into this room so that people get the opportunity to hear what's going on here.
Yeah.
Because we have been in the blind, and what I understand is that some of the selectmen sort of kind of was in the blind.
Okay, so
But-
to that point, while certainly we want to cooperate with the other boards, we don't take orders from FinCom or School Committee or Board of Selectmen or Park and Rec or Council on Aging. We just don't. We have an independent obligation and charge that we have to follow.
I
And we
understand.
have heard from the community. Many of us in this room were at the planning session that was at the Littleton Middle School in the cafeteria, and overwhelmingly specifically mentioned as to things that we need and we appreciate in our community. The library. You will see here
I
in
was at the
yellow,
meeting, so I know.
there
I
are lots
was at
of
the meeting.
highlighted, these are individual people saying that's what's meaningful to me.
But the tone that I don't like at this meeting, even right now,
Okay?
because the fact is that you think that you're authoritarian board here by virtue of the fact that the people selected you, and you're saying that you going forward, irregardless as to whether you want to hear from the other people, like FinCom, you say you don't take orders from them. You don't take orders from the selectmen.
We have
But-
an
but-
individual
I'm telling you what-
charge.
I'm telling
And
you-
when the
George,
selectmen
can I say
suggest,
something?
hold on, when the
I'm a
selectmen
member of
suggested.
FinCom.
Let me
I'm a
just
member of
finish my thought.
FinCom, and if
Let-
you
let-
want to come and understand the finances of this township, come to one of our meetings, because the town administrator, finance administrator, laid that all out at our last meeting, and how this library will impact the finances of this township.
Okay, what I am saying is that when you make statement about other bodies don't matter,
I didn't say that. I said we don't take orders
Well,
from
you're
them.
taking orders,
The-
then
The Board of
that's the same-
Selectmen
that's the
said,
same
you might want to
difference.
do another survey.
That-
What did
that-
we do? The 6 of us buckled down, came up with a survey, and got it out and have had 700 responses. The Selectmen said, you might want to do a public information session. Here I'm standing in front of you and in front of people who choose to watch this, trying to explain where we're coming from. It's not that I'm thumbing my nose
what
at
I-
any of the boards. I'm
what
saying
I-
we have a mandate and a charge, and we're elected. I'm not
I know
standing
you're
up here
elected. I
saying
know-
like
I know
it or
you-
lump
I
it,
know
we're
you're elected.
asking for your input.
I know that you're like that, and I understand that. But what I don't understand is I think that what matters here is that the people are going to end up having to pay for this. And I'm just simply saying that the number you have is 700. You made a reference about how many people come to the town meeting. Well, I think by saying that, if those 700 people, the people are gonna come to the meeting that's gonna vote for this and gonna push this through.
I don't know.
I sort of kind of get the impression that you want to railroad it through.
There's no railroading,
If you
George.
plan on railroading it through, you have your right to do what you
No, we're
want to
not-
do, and
we're
I
not
have my right to do
railroading.
what I want to do, because I will be out there telling the people that if this is the way that the selectmen doesn't matter, FinCom
That's not
doesn't
what I
matter,
said, George.
the CPA of this town doesn't matter,
That's not what I said.
I want to make sure that we're within the ballpark, that we can afford this. There are a lot of people out here that's not on that survey or doing that survey that has an issue We're paying taxes.
They can answer the survey. I don't like paying taxes either, quite frankly, but that's the system we
Now I need
have.
to come to FinCom to understand how FinCom operate.
So,
I know how they operate.
let me take this one step. We have 3 big projects coming up in town right now that we know of, the fire station, alumni field, and the library. All of them are going to require your tax dollars, whether they were dollars that were already collected, whether there are things that are going to be funded inside the levy limit or outside of the levy limit. They're all big projects that have to be funded one way or another. The library looks like it was late to the game because we didn't come before the fire station. We were doing that out of deference to the fire station to make sure it goes through. If you look back at the chairs meeting, it said the library comes before the fire station. The library was 2015, the fire station was 2020. Mr. Sanders, you seconded the motion at that meeting supporting that effort. So we were not quiet around forever about this. We were being quiet to allow the fire station to go through. All of these are going to require your tax money. We welcome going to the town ballot for a debt exclusion. I would hope that all the other projects would do the same thing and have a vote other than at town meeting as per the Board of Selectmen's policies. You can pick which ones you fund. You might choose not to fund the library, you might choose not to fund Alumni Field. That's your prerogative as a taxpayer. We're here giving you the information. When we know more about how much it will really cost, we will give you that. We are not hiding anything. At this point, we have to submit a grant to the state, which will fund part of the effort. After we do that, we have time to go to the town meeting and ask, are you willing to accept the grant if we're offered it? That's what the May town meeting basically says. If the state gives us money, that's a good thing. You then will have another opportunity at another town meeting and a ballot, hopefully, to say whether you will fund it or not when we know the exact cost and when that happens, right? We're not railroading anything through. We're not trying to go around any board. We're being as public as we can on this. Everything has been held in posted public meetings, whether with selectmen, FinCom, trustees, or elsewhere. It's all out there. These projects are going to raise your taxes one way or another. You might be funding something in the levy limit. That just means that you can't fund other services within the levy. That means that when you're going to hire a new fireman or a police officer, you have to come up with the funds somewhere, right? Everything raises your taxes that we're talking about doing, whether it's the library, alumni field, or the fire station. They're all on their own merits. You have to pick which ones you're going to support, or all of them.
Yeah, I saw Chuck's hand first, Paul.
Chuck DeCoste, Board of Selectmen. First of all, thank you very much for having this meeting, and you're right, the Board of Selectmen did say it would be great if you guys could do some more open sessions.
We agree.
Absolutely, appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
And the survey, obviously you've gotten 700 respondents, that's fantastic. So we're trying to get the voice of the people. I think it's important to work collaboratively. I think we have a history as a town of the boards, and I think it's getting better with the boards working more collaboratively. The summit that we do, or the Saturday. Super Saturday, yeah, that we do to try to get everybody's wish list out there and try to get an idea of where the budget's gonna come in. That's an example of some efforts we've made to be more open, transparent, and identify needs and work collaboratively with one another. One of the things I'd say, just to caution the trustees, is everybody has a charge, but ultimately, if we're elected, we're tasked with taking care of the taxpayer and or the residents, the registered voters that elected us. So that's who we answer to first. And then we answer to, in your case, the library. So you do have a charge that you need to do whatever you can to advocate for the library. I absolutely agree with that. At the Board of Selectmen level, we have to advocate for the entire town and make sure that we're allocating as we see best fit. I just have a couple of points of clarification. One of the comments you made relative to the engineer, the structural engineer, based on the letter that we got on December 10th, 2015, rather, gentleman named Reginald Room, who is the structural engineer that sent the letter in, he said that that the weight is well under the code that allows up to 150 pounds per square foot, and he said that he would leave it alone. So that's an exact quote from the letter that was forwarded from Mr. Rambacher when we requested it, because I asked point blank at the Board of Selectmen meeting, Sam, I think you made the presentation that said, there's too much load. And I asked, what is the load? You can't say there's too much load, the code says it's 150 pounds per square foot, and then not know what the numbers are. You can't guesstimate, and I appreciate, Mark, I know you went up and you brought a scale up and you weighed some books in certain areas. If there's some areas that are identified for right now, personally, I think we should be, if we need to move books, what Mr. Sanders said is pretty logical. Let's move some of the books down to the ground floor, if that's going to eliminate some of the concerns and anxieties that the trustees may have.
Do you have more on that?
I just have one more point
Can I
relative to.
respond to
Yeah,
that?
sure.
And Mr. Sanders' comment? So if we renovate the existing space, the law requires, if you're having books, that it's 150 pounds per square foot. So per Mr. Sanders' comment and others, what will happen is if we renovate, building, the library stays where it's at and in the renovated space, the books will be spread out so that they're not on any second floor of an existing building, right? That is the plan, if you look at where things are actually laid out. We're well aware of that. If we build a new library, state code requires it to support 150 pounds per square foot. It's not our desire, it's what the state requires. So, and if we're over limits, wherever we are in the current building, we try to do whatever we can to fix it, but.
So the other point was relative to, you referred to it as free money, and Mass General Law allows towns to have, it's called free cash. That's the term that is used, the slang, if you will. But it's referred to as the undesignated fund balance. I think it's chapter 44, Mass General Law chapter 44, which allows towns to accrue those funds from a variety of different sources. To your point, if we designate $16.2 million to renovate Russell Street School and we only spend $14 million, that $2 million can go to the undesignated fund, and then it requires some certain
Finagling?
not finagling, it's actually policy, and it's state mandated how we move the money out, and it has to go into either a stabilization fund, so we have certain limits with which we can work, and those are done at town meeting. So it's,
I was more
finagling
making
is kind of an unfortunate word.
I was more making a perception comment about how many folks hear that free cash as being tied to alumni. And many folks hear within the levy as tied to the fire station. And many folks hear library, taxes. And that's the issue that I have. And I think that, to be fair, and I said this earlier, if the order was different, I think Scott Wazinski or any proponent of Alumni Field would be making the same point, is it's all our money.
Absolutely.
All of it. And just because there's some sitting in a pot right there, I mean, theoretically, it could be returned to the taxpayers.
Oh, really?
Or it could be designated to pay down our operating budget. I mean, sure, there are ways that it can go where it can go, where instead of paying $10,000 a year in taxes, someone would say, well, oh, you're going to pay $8,000 because we collected more than we had to.
So again, there's the Commonwealth dictates how we can do that, and actually Mr. Avella had some proposals to offer up some solutions to try to lower the levy. So basically, it's not an underride, I know you can't use that term, but
Right.
essentially, just so people can understand an
Yeah.
override versus an underride, what is the term?
No, you're correct, they are two very different. And an underride and override, both are permanent. Override in the up direction, underride in the down direction.
Sure.
They changed the levy, and what I had proposed when I was still on the selectmen was that we not collect to the levy, that we go to 2% versus 2.5%. In the town, the folks in town felt they wanted to spend the full 2.5% plus new growth, and at a town meeting, that's the budget that passed with the full
Right.
2.5.
Right.
Instead of not collecting to the levy. That was the difference there.
Exactly, right.
So,
I know I get that wrong. Thank you. But
Sure.
again, thank you all for having this meeting, for doing the survey, and for everything that you've done.
Yeah, and we appreciate the fact that you had said, why don't you do it live on LCTV? So here we are, live, streaming. All right, Mr. Avella, you
I have
have
an
a
unlimited call.
comment.
Paul Lavelle, 94 Grist Mill, thanks. And folks, you did a heck of a lot of work. It's clear to me. In fact, when I say that, I'm sure you did stuff I couldn't even begin to imagine. Having been on the building committee here in town and doing the middle school, the Russell Street renovation, and the police station, knowing what went into that. And those had been in the works for some time to get things rolling. And as you said, you started, 2011? In fact, you still have it up there with the chairs. And I remember that coming about. There was a certain chairman on one board who suggested that chair of chairs, as I recall. She may be standing in front of us today.
You want me to help you?
No. But, so really, thank you on that. And I don't want to get into a tax discussion, not smart enough to do that, nor get into a construction discussion. Steve Moore can handle that quite well. But as an email I did send you folks Friday last week, some thoughts, and I use the term global solution. We all too often get in our own little silos, and we see them, and we advocate vociferously. No, and so we should. That's why you are there. And as you said, you were elected by the folks of the town of Littleton to advocate for the library and its needs and the service of the community. So I commend that. I think you're doing a good job in that regard. But I think we all can do better, and it's a very collective we, and look at this in a global solution. So it's not what's competing against one or another. You guys are on a good track to get us something that we do need. Whether it's 15,000, 25,000, 50,000 square feet, it's something, we know that. You mentioned the council on agent. Pam Campbell has done her surveys also, and we've had the studies done, still on the selectmen when that one was done, the elder needs in the community, and that's valid. Park and Rec, you mentioned Park and Rec, Alicia's been through that also, so we know there are needs there. Clearly, the town of Littleton does not have enough community space for the likes, wants, and desires of the folks of Littleton. So how do we help that? The library, and whether it's a new building, extension, or renovation, some solution, something new about the library is part of that solution. But I'd offer if we started looking at it as part of a global solution versus the library is the solution for the library and stop there, we end up in this competition mode. Even if we phased it, I don't see a need that we'd have to fund everything in one fiscal year and take that to town meeting and get a vote. But if we had one plan that put us together, and as we know, we're doing the master plan update, and I think that's a venue that helps. It's not the solution either, because that's pretty much the overriding guidance for the entire leadership of the town to use for the needs of the people. You mentioned when we were at the middle school, 225 plus people showed up at that. And certainly the library was a very important thing on many people's mind there, as were senior services and Park and Rec services also. So, without being too repetitive, I do want us to consider that global solution, and I'd ask that you guys do that. I'm not going to offer suggestions on how to build a library and anything. I know in my email to you, I offered one thought, and that's all it is. It's a thought from the ether. That's about the best I can do. And one of the things was covered parking. If we built above the current parking lot, not on it, but above it, certainly there's structural issues that Steve brought up in the conversation we had back and forth through email. But I'm not saying it tonight, say, here's the solution. I'm not smart enough to do that. But I think I am smart enough to know how much better I think we'll all be as a community. And I think the library folks would get something that they treasure greatly, because I think everybody in town, for the most part, are library folks. We see the benefit of that. It was mentioned, culturally, in addition to instructionally and educationally, the library serves a function. It's a social function also, but so is a community center of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're thinking in those terms, please, and maybe consider, maybe knocking heads together with Pam Campbell, Alicia, and really putting it together and say, how do we come up with that one solution that fits us? And if we go down a phase 1, 2, and 3, where we fund it over different fiscal years, but at least it's the plan that's there. And the business I used to be in, we certainly had the old saying is no plan survives combat or contact with the first enemy. It just doesn't. So we get that. And we're not enemies here, we're all friends. So our plans will survive. They'll morph and certainly meander a bit as we go through it. But I ask you to consider it that way, please.
Yeah, thank you.
Paul, to your comments, one of the advantages of building a new library on the slope site is it does open up more possibilities for the town to reuse the existing space to expand Park and Rec and Council on Aging and any other department that needs to expand. It's probably the cheapest way for the town to get that amount of square foot, because the state is basically paying for part of the library. Now, obviously, there's going to be renovation costs and whatever for people to move in, and we don't know how much these other space these other organizations need. As the library, we're not in a position to tell them either, right? We can say, if we move, there's this space available. We have had meetings with the Council on Aging and Park and Rec and the school committee, the school office, school administration, saying, if we're vacate the space, could you use it, right? And I know at the last selectmen's meeting, there was talk of funding going to next town meeting and asking for a town hall needs assessment survey type thing, right? And we fully support that as townspeople, right? And I actually view the library moving to a new location as a benefit to the town's taxpayers by giving them more space for those expanded services, right? That's my opinion. Others might have a different on.
I think what I'm more from Mark actually is not contradictory to that. They're complementary, but I think they become truly complementary if it's ingrained into one viewpoint, one plan, versus, well, we'll give you space.
Well, the issue with that, though, is the Mass Board of Library Commissioners, they are not funding COAs, Park and Recs, and other, right? So that's the procedural fly in the ointment.
I know there's, again, in my email, I could come up with many, many ways on how we can't do something. I'm asking that we just put our heads together, figure out how to do it. Because for every one of us in the room, we can come up with 10 no's.
Yeah.
Okay?
So we could-
Coming up with a single or 2 or 3 good yeses,
Yeah.
that's the hard work.
And when I read your email, I thought, oh, that'd be great. We can build this community center, right? And there was some pushback, like a massive community center building that's going to take away from the rural character of the town. And those sorts of aesthetics put aside, if we wanted to build a $12 million community center, we have to pay $12 million for our community center. There's no $5 million and 2.5% for an LED building coming in through this funding source.
Actually, absolutely clear, because even when we did the schools, I forget the high school, I think it was 52% from the Massachusetts State Building and Municipal Authority, and it went down to 46 or so by the time we did Russell Street. And there were certain restrictions on what were reimbursable expenses.
Sure.
I remember that clearly, and you guys, as far as the
We have the
library,
same.
are in that same boat.
Right.
Different agency, but it's the same boat.
Yeah.
So that's clear to me too, I get that.
So I view the library as phase one in your view, Paul. The building a new library is phase one. Phase two is what are you going to do for the Council on Aging and Park and Rec? Now that you have the available space.
15,000 square feet.
And it would be nice if we had a full elaborate plan on what we're doing in phase one, phase two, phase three before we start. But we're under a time deadline that we have to put something out to the state by January 2017. If we do not do that, the next date is probably January of 2025, right? Before we get money from the state, right? So we are going to, we can't wait for everyone else to catch up, right? It would have been nice if we, as a town, had more of a vision back in 2011 and planned these things all out that, well, if the library does this, then Council on Aging can do this, and someone sat there and figured out all the moving pieces and what goes where. But at this point, the library either has to go in 2017 or just wait, right? And in my mind, when the state is offering you free money, it doesn't make sense to wait for those other phases to be fully developed before we proceed.
And you may recall my email, I used the term free money.
Yeah.
And I say this very cautiously, I forget exactly what, because there is no such thing.
Yes.
Whether it's state money, federal money, it's our tax dollars.
Yeah.
Jenna, you highlighted that well. My last parting comment then, and I'll be silent, is I heard everything you just said. The deadlines that you're facing, they're not self-imposed, they're real deadlines out there if we want to be in this phase. So I understand that. But I would, again, just say, consider, it doesn't have to be a fully fleshed out plan, but rather than just say, hey, yeah, we'll give them space. Get with them, and maybe we stop putting it together, we put in front of the Board of Selectmen, and it actually says, hey, we got a 1, 2, 3 phase program. And while this phase one is pretty well fleshed out, phase 2 and 3 need to be fleshed out more. And that allows you to continue moving on the timeline that you have. And it's pulling other people, other constituencies in.
Right.
So it's not the library folks just looking at, and I want to use it that way, and I
Sure.
don't want it to be, I hope it doesn't sound pejorative, because I don't mean
It
it
does
that
not
way.
sound pejorative.
Um,
I'm happy to be a library folks.
And as I said earlier,
It's not
everybody in
pejorative to
town,
me at all,
at
in
least I
fact.
feel that. But seriously, because you want to build consensus across the broad town, so that at town meeting, 250, whatever it is,
Right.
but more importantly, when we actually go to the ballot, if it goes that direction, that now we're going to have 2,000 or 3,000 people show up to vote, and how do they feel that I see this as contributing to the entire town?
Agreed.
So we
Agreed.
fully, we're actively engaged with Council on Aging We're working on getting more engaged with Park and Rec and the schools and everything.
Super.
So
Thanks, folks. And
Yeah,
thank you for the
great.
effort.
it's in the works.
Did you want to comment to that, or did he cover it?
I'd like to make a comment.
Of course, David Sills,
Yeah,
one of our
David Sills,
trustees.
trustee. Just briefly, speaking about a senior center, Council of Aging Senior Center, to build, I don't know what it would cost to build a senior center building, but I'm guessing it would be a few $1 million, no matter what, if you build something that size. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to build it here, it'd have to be built elsewhere. And in some of our research and talking to people, the people who frequent the senior center don't want to be in some place that's out at the edge of town, okay? Some of the other towns around us have put senior centers out at the edge of town in places where they can afford to put it. And those senior centers are fighting to get back to the center of town because the seniors want to be, they want to be able to go to the library from the senior center. They want to go to the cafeteria and have breakfast, okay? And have it all very close, okay? So it's just my feeling that if we have a new library and it gets built on the slope and that area is empty over there, it just seems like the most logical place to put a senior center. It just seems to, it's in the building, okay? The library would be right there, Park and Rec is there, senior center, all still a campus. And not separated by, you know, maybe a mile or two where people now have to travel.
Thank you, David. Yes?
Yeah, I'm Richard Schreiber from Star Hill. I've lived here for 30 years now? 31 years.
So you're new to town?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I'm now becoming one of the townspeople. One of the things I've noticed about Littleton, and some of the people seem to be talking cross purposes, is when a new project comes up, i.e. the library, well, I'm saying new, it's been in for a while. So we have a fire station, so we have this, so we have that. They always seem to be separate little entities. And I think this is addressing one of your concerns is, oh, we do a library. And what do we do with the senior center? It doesn't seem to me that if the architect we had on board said, okay, here's a library, here's a space for the senior center, here's a space for Parks and Recreation, these won't come on board until after the library is built. But it never seems to happen that way. Do you follow what I'm?
I don't.
Somebody was
Sorry, I'm
trying
trying to.
Somebody was talking about a senior center and putting it somewhere else.
Yes.
But yet, when you've done the library and you have a space over there, you have 15,000 square feet over here.
Right.
So what would you do with that 15,000 square feet? Are you in board with the other people that come back and say, well, Parks and Recreation needs this?
Right.
Can we do a little space plan? You've done just a space plan a lot.
Right, we have talked to Council on Aging. We are beginning to talk to Park and Rec. It seems to make sense that those departments that are already here, that if they
Would stay here.
wanted the 15,000 square feet, that they'd be, I think it's, again, it's gonna be some sort of a feasibility study and a needs study. I'm pretty sure Pam Campbell can make a strong argument for why her space on the third floor up there simply is not enough.
So,
It isn't so much as that, it's, and this might be the wrong meeting to bring this up to. And the reason being is that you mentioned something about a building that was keeping you with the town, the
rural character of the town?
Yeah, the rural character.
Right.
Well, that's already been destroyed. All right, IBM did a nice job. I mean, that building did a nice job there.
You've got to drive past it like this.
Well, no, it's not a bad building, you know, and the point.
Right.
All right, so we're past that already, rural character. We are, we've gone past it now.
So what's your point?
And the point is that I lost it, I'm sorry.
So a couple comments. If if we get a new library and the library vacates that space,
Right.
the library no longer controls that space. We can't say, Council on Aging, you can have this room and not that room. It belongs to the town and will be controlled by, presumably, the selectmen. Just like right now, when we want to build on the slope site, we have to ask whoever currently owns that land for their permission, right? And we, as library trustees, but also as just taxpayers in town, want to see the space used as what's best for the town, right? But we, as trustees, don't get to dictate it anymore. We have, or have no control over it and really not much say, right? We support Council on Aging expanding into that space, but not as so much as the library, just as general taxpayers, that we see the need for a senior center, and we see the library moving as a good way of getting a senior center. That's my take as a person, not as a trustee, right? That if I get a new library, the seniors there's space in town for the seniors to move into. It's a win-win, right?
Oh, I agree with you. I totally agree with you. I'm not disagreeing at all. All I'm saying is that in this presentation, and this is why this may be the wrong meeting, is in this presentation, while you're presenting the new library on the other side, there's no reason why someone can't have that same floor plan and say, oh, by the way, the senior center might go here. I'm not saying you're dictating. I'm not saying that you're allowing them.
Right.
But they have to
Right.
be taken care of.
You're absolutely right.
I agree with you, but
Okay.
it's kind of, in my view, it's kind of deceiving you in the saying,
Why?
if we move, the senior center is going to go there, because I have no control over that as the library, right? We can tell you that, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, that it's a place where the senior center could go, and we did, right? We said we opened up space for the senior, Council on Aging, and Park and Rec on the pros and cons side, and we told you how much space opens up on those different plans, right? And you might have missed it on the slide. But
No,
it's not.
I saw it on the
It's not
side.
our choice as trustees.
I know it isn't
on that.
yours. I'm just
So-
saying it's your,
And
he brings up a point, and I believe this gentleman brought up a point. It was just the fact that these things take one at a time. And I don't want to become too argumentative, but it's like a fact of, if you sat down beforehand, the presentation, and you
Sure.
sat with these people, and you sat with the Board of
Board of
Selectmen,
Selectmen are doing that. We
okay,
just
and you
that Monday
said,
night.
okay, they need 5,000 square feet. Well, you're trying to sell it.
Right.
There's no reason
Right, and-
why you can't say,
so
they
we-
could be there.
so we've met with the Council on Aging, I believe, took a vote at their last meeting, and they're in favor of us building a library on the slope site.
But
End of
But
discussion.
that
It's-
doesn't guarantee COA gets the space. That is a
Correct.
community assessment and a feasibility and then a choice made. Are we gonna
I
invest?
wasn't asking for guarantees.
Right,
I'm just asking for a lead into somebody saying, hey,
yes,
here's a library,
We-
here's this,
yes,
here's that, here's
yes.
another thing, rather than wait 2 years down the road and all of a sudden, somebody comes up and says, oh, we have to build a
Right.
senior center.
I'm not interested in
Oh,
leaving that
we-
empty to get ridden, raccoons move in the way they did in the
Oh,
old
we
police
already have
station. Right, so, I mean, who knows what could have been done with that building? Maybe exactly
Which
what it
one?
is. It's
The old
Raccoonville.
police
Police
But,
station tear it down.
but, right now, we have space which can be used, and it's part of a contiguous building with all sorts of other good stuff.
Yeah.
Andy, you wanted to make a comment?
No, I just wanted to say the whole global thing. Well, first of all, the library, I think we sort of think of ourselves as for everybody anyway, but we like to spread it out also. But I think of this whole, it's been called a campus, and I also include the schools. I mean, the reason why we wanted to be in this area is because after lunch at the senior center, a lot of seniors, before and after, they're at the library. The kids, after school, it's okay with the parents mostly that they walk up here. We like being part of this whole thing, and also
Thank
being
you.
close to the town offices is great. I mean,
Don't ask me to come
Diane
anymore.
Crory and I are always sending people back and forth to, like, check on records or ask questions, or, it's really nice to be able to have everybody working together in that way, and I think by being in this same space, we're able to do that. Not one building, but, sort of a campus.
Yes.
Dr. Liza Ahern, 11 Florence Street. I'm a professional educator by trade, and I wanted to just, first of all, as a resident, I've known about this library looking to rebuild since 2011. We get the flyers, we got the notices, we give money to the trustees, we give money to the friends. Libraries are very important to us. It's where my daughter made her first friends, and she's 5 and she's going to kindergarten in the fall. So she just got her first library card. But to the point where we're talking about, well, you didn't plan with everybody. We in Littleton were very fortunate to get several grants along the way to plan and build this library. So that's money that had to go to a specific point. It couldn't go to also plan for COA and also plan for Park and Rec. But that being said, we have a unique opportunity in 2017 to apply for that grant. It's no guarantee. And if we fail to take that chance and take that opportunity, if we have to wait till 2025, my daughter will be in high school and ready to graduate. Okay?
So this is for Callie. This is for Callie. Do it for Callie.
But I also want to point out, as an educator and somebody who works for the state, and I am not speaking as the state, books will not go away. We are not going to an all-digital world. I am sorry, my daughter doesn't own a Kindle. As an educator, I talk to schools all the time. We definitely incorporate technology as a piece of our education, but it does not precede all the other pieces. Touching, learning, experimenting, building. We're talking about STEM education. You can't get that on a Kindle. You cannot get that in digital matter. So if you think that the state, and again, I'm not really talking as a state, but I'm talking as somebody who knows about education, we're not going to go to an all-digital format ever, because children learn in all different ways, adults learn in all different ways, and believe it or not, there's a certain population in Littleton who cannot afford internet in their home, who cannot afford, and ourselves included, to buy all the books on my daughter's summer reading list from her school this year, because that would be about $90 worth of children's books to read her 12 little stories for her summer reading list. We got those books from the library. We bring them back to the library. We meet our friends here. We see elderly people here. This is an important entity in any town, and certainly important in Littleton. So if we fail to take the opportunity to even apply for the grant, then we're missing a huge, huge opportunity to have the state pay anywhere from 40 to 50%.
52.
52, okay.
In looking at the clock, I think we need to wrap up our time here. There are 2 computers in the back of the room, which if you have not taken the survey, you may feel free to. There are also paper copies in the back near the door there, if you'd like to take those. The fall programming schedule was handed out to most of you when you came in. I believe there are extras, and there's also a pamphlet there about the library project as a whole. I thank you all for coming.
Madam Chair, I've been holding my hand up back here while you went to people back and forth here, and I don't think that you're being fair to me with regards to...
You can feel free to speak again.
But you let other people speak as well, so I'm just saying, I had my hand back here held up for quite a while. Okay?
George, you had 20 minutes at the beginning.
Don't tell me I had 20 minutes, don't give me that.
Okay.
If you can make it brief, because in the interest of time.
This is what they're supposed to be, input.
Yeah. It's actually an information
Colloquial time
session.
and mean.
Right, it's an information session with an opportunity for us to answer questions and take your comments.
Right,
And
so if you want
we
to
took-
time people, just let me say it, you want to time people, you better time everybody.
Well, if that's the case, quite frankly, you've had the most time.
Well,
Go ahead.
But go ahead.
Make your point.
Make your point so that we can offer people to take the survey and they can take their paperwork.
my point is that, one, I put in a petition to the selectmen that when this building becomes vacated over there with the library, when they move into the new library, that they allow the senior center to go in over there and they renovate that building over there, which they said that they probably need for other space, maybe even moving the selectmen over there instead of this 103 here. The other thing is that I'd like to know, is this trustee board against sitting down and talking to the other committees, such as the Board of Selectmen, the county? Are you against the collaboration that I see that we need in terms of me as a taxpayer knowing
Yeah,
roughly what this
right.
town is saying we can afford?
So to answer your question, since 2011, there has been talk about the library. There have been over 50 public meetings where we have gone to FinCom and we've talked to the Board of Selectmen. And certainly now, with this being a much more ripe piece of fruit, I am of the opinion, as is our chair, that we need to continue to reach out and continue to inform and continue to collaborate. The reason why we're here tonight, and the reason why there's a survey, is because another board said, you might want to do another survey, and you might want to have a public information session. So we're being collaborative. The idea that this is being done in a vacuum by 6 trustees and a director who have, we're gunning for taxes to go up, is not accurate. And by way of how much does it cost? Whatever we vote on is how much it costs. And if it turns out that the majority of people say, yeah, jack up the taxes, then the majority rules, because that's how we do it here. In Littleton, in the state, in the country, in a way, I'm not going to get into electoral college votes, but by and large, the popular vote is the vote that presides. That's what we do here in town too. And I want to see 1,000, 2,000 people come to town meeting. I've wanted that for a long time, and I don't see that as being something that is going to be in our future unless people start to feel strongly about this. What can we afford? Whatever we vote for. We could be the next Dover if we all wanted to jack up our taxes 10 times as what they are. I don't want that. We could have a gold-plated library. It could be a 10 million, or 100 million trillion billion dollar library. We can afford it if y'all vote for it. That's not what we're bringing. I am a frugal New Englander. I am happy to bring a project that will meet the needs of the community without the gold plating. We don't need that. What we need is a community to come together and decide, is this an asset we're willing to pay for? As we do with all the other things that come before us. So by way of collaboration, absolutely. The library trustees want to collaborate. We want people to come to our meetings. Our next meeting is September 1st. It's held in the Cooper Room. Feel free to come, and in the meanwhile, we're going to ask that surveys be completed. We're going to close the survey. We're not just going to leave it open in perpetuity, so perhaps another week or so. I think we opened it on a Friday, so maybe we'll leave it open till next Friday. At some point, the return on the numbers begins to diminish.
Allow me a shameless plug, please. Master Plan Update Steering Committee.
Yes.
6 September, right here in room 103. Please come on out, 7 o'clock.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you all for coming tonight. And please grab stuff on the way out and take surveys. Thank you.